Good morning and welcome to our Tuesday edition of the Retailer to Publisher webinars that we produce here at GTS Distribution. My name is Scott Bohr. I'm the category manager for gaming specialty products, which includes role-playing games, miniature games, and gaming accessories like dice and all the other fun stuff that goes along with enhancing gaming experiences. And today we're going to be joined by Will Sobel. He's the Director of Sales, Marketing, and Licensing for Green Ronin Publishing. He's got some exciting news for us about products that have already been released, as well as some upcoming expansion for that product. And one quick note, housekeeping before we go ahead, is that the chat window is down below on the bottom of your screen. If you hover over, you'll see a little chat window show up, and you can just enter any questions there. That's where I'll be moderating those questions and delivering them out to Will, so that he can answer them as we go along. And then the other fun thing about this webinar is that those of you who are in attendance, when you order the product that we're talking about today, which is going to be the Expanse RPG from Green Ronin, you'll also be getting an additional discount at 52% off on the product for the rest of the week. So it'll give you a little bonus for showing up and for asking questions. And without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Will to talk about some of the products that they're coming up with.
Hi guys, I'm Will. Like Scott said, I'm the Director of Sales, Marketing, and Licensing at Green Ronin. I'm going to talk a bit about what we do and then dive into the Expanse and some new stuff here. The first thing is, who are we? Green Ronin, founded in 2000, which means next year is our 20th anniversary. Our first game was called Orc, which is kind of a beer and pretzels RPG where everybody is orcs, and all you do is smash things. And we won a bunch of awards for Best Publisher and a bunch of other stuff. We have several awards. And that's because we pride ourselves on innovation in RPGs, which is not something you saw a lot of until recently, and quality products down to just like page weight, stuff like that. Our in-house, we have two in-house systems. The big one and the one that we're going to talk about today is called the Age system. I have a brief overview of what it is here, but the key thing to remember is that the Age system, what it wants to do is lean into narrative, and the big way that we do that is called the stunt system. And stunts are an answer to critical hits. So instead of saying I roll a 20 and I do extra damage, what happens is you're rolling 3 6-sided die, and if any of those die match, so if you roll 2 2s and a 3, you get stunt points, and each character has a list of stunts that they can do that give you that oomph of I did something extra, I did something cool. But it's not always just I deal extra damage. So for example, you might disarm an opponent or knock them down, or in a conversation you might do something extra to convince somebody, or somebody nearby may have overheard what you're saying and agree with you and give you a little bit of extra weight in the conversation. But the whole idea is that we want players to engage more in narrative than just saying something like I rolled a 20, I do extra damage, which is cool, and that gives you a certain like I did something awesome. But this lets players kind of tell their own story about it. We have a bunch of different properties that we use this system with, including Dragon Age, which was featured on tabletop several years ago when that was still a thing, and Blue Rose, which is a romantic fantasy setting, kind of akin to Chronicles of Narnia or Dragon Riders of Pern. And the one we have that released last year that we're going to talk about today is the Expanse, which you may have heard of. And then we also have Fantasy Age and Modern Age, which are kind of the flagship titles of this system. because they are in-house systems or in-house games. So instead of being tied to a video game property like Dragon Age, we have Fantasy Age, which plays very similarly, but each of these iterations kind of build on themselves. So if you are familiar with the age system, if you've played one, it's very easy to pick up the others because they are inherently tied together. But we do a lot of design and development work on systems that are unique to each of these so that they feel different. They have their own identity. And I'll get into some examples of that when we start talking about the Expanse. So the Expanse and the Game Master's Kit are both available now. They released earlier this year. We have a campaign called Abzu's Bounty, which is slated for a November release. That's going to be in Scott's system later this week, so that you can pre-order copies of that. Abzu's Bounty is 6 adventures long, and so the core rulebook that's out now takes up to the first novel in the series from the Expanse. And Abzu's Bounty is going to bring that up to the end of the second novel, Caliban's War. Then early next year, we're going to have a book called Ships of the Expanse, which I like to say is kind of like a monster manual of spaceships. And it's going to have generic, like this is the type of ship, but it'll also have named ships that are part of the Expanse universe. So if you're familiar with the storyline, you'll be able to look up those specific ships and see what modifications the crew has done to make it, that ship. And then, so after Ships of the Expanse, we're trying to hit 3 books a year for the next several years. There's a lot of content out for the Expanse, and our whole goal is that we want each book that we bring out in this line to sort of advance the timeline of the story, of the narrative a little bit. And eventually what we're going to do is, when we're about halfway, we're going to release a book that's not necessarily a new core rule book, but a guide of here's a bunch of new stuff to add, new alliances or new factions, new types of ships that are introduced into the story. If you're familiar with the novels, there's a bunch of aliens and stuff that end up showing up that change everything, and people are making new alliances and stuff. So that's kind of a big deal, and it changes a lot of the fundamentals of the way people interact. So that's kind of what we're planning on doing with that. We've got several years worth of content stocked up. The Expanse, so like I said, uses the age system. This is a direct iteration of Modern Age. So it is classless, which is non-traditional for RPGs, but our developer, Malcolm, takes a bunch of stuff and choices for character creation that would be in classes, but sort of makes it a bit more free range. So it's kind of like you're at a buffet, I'm going to choose this background and this origin, and it's going to give me a very unique character when I'm, instead of just picking a class and sticking with that path. And there's a bunch of progression differences because there are no classes. One of the other unique things about the Expanse is that all of damage is lethal, which is very fitting for the setting because it's a dark, gritty space opera. Think Game of Thrones in space if you're not familiar with it. But there are ways to mitigate damage coming in. So there's this system where you can take conditions instead of taking damage. And conditions can be like, I broke an arm, or you hit me so hard I fell over, stuff like that. And this will mitigate the amount of damage that you take. And then you also have a pool of points called Fortune, which you can spend on rerolls, but you can also spend to mitigate damage. Once your character takes damage, you're gone. That's it. There's no playing around in the Expanse. So these are all things that are unique to the Expanse game. But if you're familiar with the age system, it's easy to pick up. And once you have customers who are familiar with the Expanse, it's easy to get them to go into other age games, because a lot of the systems and characters and stuff are very easily translatable from one age game to another. The Expanse is based on the book series. It has a show that was on Sci-Fi for several years and is now on Prime Video. The 4th season is getting ready to come out in December, and they've already been renewed for a 5th season, so we know that there's going to be a huge tail on this property, and it's just picking up steam and going and going and going. The book series, the 8th book came out earlier this year. The 9th one is planned to come out sometime next year. And that will be the end of the main story, but there are plenty of other stories in this setting to tell as well. The authors have done short stories and novellas and stuff like that, so there's clearly room for more of that. James S. A. Corey is the author, which is actually 2 people. One of them is Ty Fennick, who was George R.R. Martin's assistant for several years. So when I say Game of Thrones in space, there's a lot of blood there. It is actually Game of Thrones in space. We also have Mutants and Masterminds. I'm just gonna kind of run through this because it's a very high quality property of ours. But it's D20 superheroes. It's the 3rd edition originally came out in 2011. We have a bunch more coming out. Superheroes are kind of a big deal right now. Maybe you've heard of Avengers. And D20 is super familiar with to anyone who's familiar with Dungeons and Dragons. So if you're looking to diversify your RPGs, Mutants and Masterminds and the Expanse are both great places to go. Mutants and Masterminds, especially if you have a group who is very, very intimately familiar with 5th edition or Dungeons and Dragons of any kind. This is really easy to teach if they're familiar with D20 stuff already. Then we have an announcement. We announced at Gen Con that we have licensed the 5th season, which is a trilogy of science fiction and fantasy novels, where each novel in the trilogy separately won a Hugo Award. It's the first time that that's ever happened. The rundown of the 5th season is that it's post-apocalyptic fantasy. Every couple of years on this world, the Earth shakes up, starts spitting lava, things break apart, and basically the whole world is recreated every several years. So that's kind of an interesting place to go with an RPG, so we decided to do it. We have a retailer program that Scott and I have talked about a bit. The way that this works is if you have any consumers in your store who pre-order any of my books, they can get a PDF for an additional $5. And the way that it works is I email you a code. You tell me, hey, I pre-ordered 3 Expanse books from Scott. And then I send you 3 codes, and then you give those codes out to your customers as you need to. The rules after that are all up to you. I don't care what you do with them as long as you are giving them to your customers to incentivize them to pick up books in your store. Pre-order them through you, hopefully. This initiative works as soon as pre-orders are live. So you see Scott has put in Abzu's Bounty into the GTS system. You go in and pre-order 3 copies of Abzu's Bounty through him. You're going to get 3 codes same day or as soon as I email you back, which is usually a day or 2. That's a great incentive for you guys. We're hoping to kind of build more of a trust through GTS and through you guys, so that we can move more books. This is something that we offer. We don't like to use the word free, but lots of other RPG companies are giving out their PDFs for free. I think that devalues my product, which is bad for both you and for me. So if I can offer it for additional $5 through you guys to get them in your stores, that's what I'm going to do. And then just a quick list of some upcoming releases for our lines. Modern Age is getting a monster manual called Enemies and Allies. Fantasy Age is getting something similar called Layers, but the way that it works is that instead of focusing on monsters, it's focusing on locations that you can just pick up, like haunted forests or stuff like that, with enemies pre-made so that it's easier for GMs to just pick up the information and slot it in instead of having to figure out what to do with it. The Lost Citadel is a 5th edition game that mixes zombies and fantasy, like Walking Dead meets Lord of the Rings, where this world has been overcome by zombies and the last remaining heroes all are holed up in a single dwarven fortress. Mutants and Masterminds Time Travelers Codex, because what's better than superheroes is time travel. And Blue Rose Envoys of the Mount is a guidebook for a specific region in Blue Rose that deals with specific sects of knights, Envoys of the Mount. And that is all I've got. I'm here to field any questions if you have any.
Yeah, so once again, if you hover over the main view screen there's a button there that says chat. Just go ahead and pop in there and enter any information or questions you might have. The Pre-Order Plus program is certainly something we're working on right now to help promote, and we'll add that to all of our listings on our website for Green Ronin products, so that that it helps increase consumer awareness, increases retailer awareness, and hopefully generates some additional sales and additional trust and loyalty through those retail connections. As I mentioned before, the Expanse RPG book, the core rule book, and the Game Master's Kit are in stock now with GTS. If you order this week, you'll get an additional discount on those 2 titles through Green Ronin, and we'll be happy to get those out to you as soon as possible. They're in warehouses now, so we can ship them out right away. And we're eagerly expecting some of the new content coming out for that game, Abzu's Bounty, and some of the content that you talked about today sounds really exciting for both that and things like Mutants and Masterminds, which I played in college, and played a lot of that. So.
Yep. Yeah, Mutants and Masterminds, kind of a cult favorite. I mean, superheroes are kind of a big deal, so we've seen a huge bump in interest in that, right? People want to play the Avengers and stuff like that, which is kind of cool.
And it's a great implementation of the D20 system for that genre as well. So really well done on that one. Not seeing any questions come up. I guess you must have answered all the questions in your presentation. So well done, very thorough.
Thank you.
And if there aren't any last questions here, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up and let folks continue on with their day. There will be more webinars coming up in the near future, so keep an eye on your Facebook and in your email. If you haven't registered for the webinars, you should have a link to do that if you signed up today. So go ahead and do that, and then you'll be aware of everything coming up. Want to thank Will and for the time that he's put into this, and for the presentation, and for all the great products that he's behind there at Green Ronin, both past, present, and future. So thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Everybody have a great day, and we'll chat again soon.